Planting and growing. There are many ways to plan and plant your garden. We recommend putting your plan on paper or on the computer if you have a different program that's on your computer. Or there are lots of different apps out there that make it real easy to plan your garden and have it in your back pocket all the time. Always make sure that your map has a north marked on it so you can follow the sun as you're planting. Make a list of vegetables, the plant dates based on your location, days to maturity, and spacing. Spacing is often overlooked. If you plant crops too close together, they can shade each other out, they outcompete for resources, and they can just add stress to the other plants, and your production just won't be as bountiful. Incorporating perennial plants in your garden is recommended. They're crops that come back every year, like having an artichoke plant. Yes, it does grow in Nevada, or a rhubarb plant growing in your garden. It's often nice to just have always something growing in your garden so that you're always checking on it more and more. There's always some green stuff growing in there. If you are going to plant tall and vining crops, try to always plant them near the north side of the garden so that you can avoid shading. And then as you're making this garden plan and you're putting it on whatever thing you want to make it on, paper, computer, your app, it's really important to also indicate where you're going to have your pathways, where you're going to be walking, because you want to make sure that you're walking in the same spots all the time, so you're not adding any more compaction within your garden. And then after we've done all those fun things, then we can think about what to plant. And this can be a little overwhelming if you're a brand new gardener. We recommend that you start with some of the real simple crops that are often very, very low maintenance and do well in all of Nevada. Green beans, and generally bush beans if you're going to do any beans, because there's not a lot of maintenance in the trellising. Zucchinis, cherry tomatoes, peas, and cucumbers. Those are all great starter vegetables to be growing. And I think they're almost all in this great photo up here. The next thing you want to think about is what your family is going to eat, or if you don't have a family, if it's just a solo person. We want to make sure that we're going to grow things that are going to be consumed and not just grow things to throw out, or it's been decided that nobody likes to eat those things. Recommend signing up for multiple seed catalogs just so that you can go through those seed catalogs and see what is offered. See what different things are out there that you can grow and what different things will grow in your area. And then if you're still a little confused or you have more questions, see if your area has a seed swap and attend that seed swap. Generally, those happen early in the year. Or go and talk to your UNR Extension Master Gardener in your county and ask them questions and see what kind of resources they have to help you choose what you're going to plant in your vegetable garden. Now we want to know when we should plant. Because Nevada is so diverse in terms of temperatures and growing seasons and soils and everything like that. It's going to be much different in northern Nevada versus southern Nevada. So knowing your USDA plant hardiness zone will be a big factor in knowing when to plant. And then also taking time to meet with other gardeners in your neighborhood, or again, your extension master gardeners, or if your area has a community garden, going and talking to those gardeners and seeing what they are growing and when they're planting and when they're harvesting, those types of things. So like we talked about, there's different growing seasons, some in spring and summer and fall and winter. From northern to southern Nevada are growing different things. Northern Nevada, we're not growing much. In southern Nevada, they might be growing more. So we want to think about what our growing seasons are in our locations, and then look at how our hardy, semi-hardy plants, those are ones that are going to be able to take a a frost versus our summer crops, which are tender but don't like to have real extreme heats. So knowing when to plant those will be very region specific. But some great examples of hardy and semi-hardy crops are peas, radishes, carrots, and different brassicas, which are cauliflower, kale, broccoli, and then some summer tender crops, tomato, peppers, squashes. All don't like to be, generally don't like to grow below 50 degrees. Some ways to extend your season is with season extenders, or to even just start it. And the reasons why we use these are because we don't have enough days, frost-free days, to get a crop to full maturity, or we might need to use this as an extender to shade the area because it gets too hot and we don't want our blossoms to fall off of our tomatoes. So figuring out which season extender is right for your area can be a helpful tool to get your vegetable garden growing, or just extending it, or to start it. So next thing we'll talk about is a lot of people get really nervous about planting seeds. Since it's time to start planting that garden, direct seeding, planting seeds, is the most economical way to grow a garden. When direct seeding, you want to make sure that your soil's about 40 degrees or more and not soggy. If the soil is too wet, then the seed may rot because it's not going to get any oxygen in there to help it germinate. So in a good way to determine if your soil is okay to plant in, take a handful full of soil and squeeze it. And if an excess amount of water comes out of it and the soil is stuck together, then it's most likely too wet. If the soil has a small amount of water in it and it crumbles after you've opened your hand, then your soil should be good to plant in. And a way to know if your soil is above 40 degrees is if you have a thermometer, any thermometer in your house, especially like a cooking thermometer, you can stick it in the soil and it will take the temperature of the soil. Know the correct planting depth of the seed that you're going to plant. When seeds are planted too deep, germination rates can drop. And then after seeds are planted in the soil, remember to water after. We really want to make sure that you get a good seed to soil contact. It's crucial for germination rates. Do not let the soil dry out completely. So you may need to hand water during the germination phase if your irrigation is causing crusting, which can happen with things such as flood irrigating. And soil crusting happens when the soil develops a hard layer of soil surface after the seed on top, and the seedlings can't come up. When they do come up, they can be deformed, or they've just really struggled, so they're already stressed out. In the upper left corner of this slide, those are 2 bean plants that were affected by crusting. Another planting technique with direct seeding is hilling. Hilling is placing several seeds in one spot at definitive intervals. Often the Three Sisters is done this way. Squash, corns, and beans. You don't plant them all at once. You plant them at different times, but you're planting a certain amount of seeds in each hill. Some gardens are large enough to use a seed driller to get crops planted with proper spacing and depth without breaking our backs. The picture of the upper right of this slide is a seed driller, and it is great if you have a large garden area. They come with discs that give proper spacing, and then it has a little plow underneath it that you can go down to the proper planting depth. So it'll dig the trench, plant the seeds in the straight line for you. Crops that are often direct seeded only, but this doesn't mean that you can't find these as transplants, but it's often recommended that these are direct seeded because they just do much better. Being direct seeded are squash plants or melons, peas, beans, potatoes, different herbs such as dill, okra, beets or Swiss chard, and carrots. And with things like carrots, where the seeds are so tiny, you'll have to do some thinning. after they have germinated. And thinning is the process of reducing the number of seedlings in the soil. This is to decrease competition. The seeds are small, and germination rates can be difficult due to soil moisture requirements. With carrots, it's recommended that the soil stays moist, not wet, like soggy wet, for 21 days. So you might have to go out and hand water every day until you start seeing germination and the little green sprouts coming up. So you've decided to plant with some seeds, and so you purchased some seed packets. You should become familiar with what's on the back of the seed packet. There's lots of different information that is very beneficial. And then after you have planted the seeds, I recommend that you keep that seed packet even if it's empty. You can put it in your journal or take a picture of it and put it with your file if you have it on an app or on your computer. It's just nice to know if that crop has done well, or maybe it didn't do well, or you didn't like something about it. You can reference where you bought it, what the variety was, instead of trying to remember the next year when you get your seed catalogs back. It'll have different information on the back of the seed packet, such as the common name and the Latin name, the number of seeds per packet, when to sow them outside versus inside, and oftentimes they'll have a real general USDA zone rating on there. Planting depth, spacing, days till emergent, and if the plant would need to be thinned, it would have thinning recommendations. Also, it'll have if it's been treated. Some seeds have different treatments on them, and if they have been treated, also have some safety gear that may be needed to be worn when planting the seeds. And some will say if they are that they're not GMO or genetically modified organisms label on there. From what I understand, GMOs are still not available for the general public to purchase. So this is not really a big concern for home gardeners. It'll also say hybrid versus open pollinators. Hybrid seeds are seeds that have been intentionally crossbred with two or more plants. This is not creating a GMO. The seeds is just combining the best characteristics of the plants to give you a great a plant that'll produce well. The seeds saved from hybrids do not come true. Like when you replant the seeds, you will not get this exact same plant that it came from. You might not know what you're going to get, but they still will grow. Where an open pollinated seed are those that are naturally pollinated through wind, birds, insects, and other natural mechanisms. They do come true from these seeds in kind of in the same way that children resemble their parents. These seeds are the ones that you want to save if you want to start saving seeds. And they also have a sell-by date on them. So if you're buying for a certain year, you want to make sure that that growing year is stamped on that seed. If it is previous years, the viability rate of or how well they'll germinate decreases with each year. So we want to make sure that we're buying for the growing season that we're growing in. Transplants, or sometimes people refer to them as starts or sets. These really help with plants that have long maturity dates, get a jump start on growing in different areas. They are started in containers, indoors or in greenhouses. They are started in soilless potting soil and sometimes in plastic pots or peat pots. And there's always a question about if you should plant the peat pots in the ground. In Nevada, we have a hard time breaking down peat pots in our soils because we have such a low amount of organic matter in the soils, even though in the north and the south. So we just recommend that you take the plant out of the peat pot and plant the plant in the soil directly. Some common plants that are grown as starts are tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, brassicas such as broccoli, kale, cauliflower, um, and different herbs such as basil or thyme, oregano. They're also started in as starts.